The Atlanta Story is a podcast highlighting Atlanta's most interesting creators, entrepreneurs, and builders. I'm Jon Birdsong with Atlanta Ventures, and in today's episode, we have designer Brian Steely. His start in the professional design world began when he sent an unsolicited tour design poster to the manager of Widespread Panic. Their interest and his newfound calling sparked Steely's love for what he's done for the past 22 years. Since then, he's done design work for restaurants, record labels, and corporations, just to name a few. In this episode, we talk about the principles of design, how to find the soul of a brand, and the worst career advice he's ever received. We hope you enjoy the show and subscribe to the Atlanta Story podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Atlanta Story podcast. Today, we have designer Brian Steely. Brian Steely, welcome to the Atlanta Story podcast.
Thanks for having me, John.
Excited to touch about today the Atlanta ecosystem around design, how you think about design, some of the fun projects you worked on over the years, and go from there. And so, first question, years ago, you sent Widespread Panic a design of a poster, and a couple months later, you got a call from their manager, and the manager said, "Hey, we dig this." Why did you send it to them? Did you send it to anyone else? Was this like a savvy marketing, a content marketing before it was content marketing? Tell us a little context around that story, because it seemed like it set you off in your career.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because at the time I was in college, I was a huge Widespread Panic fan. I think if you went to college during that time, you were either a Big Fish fan or you're a big Widespread Panic fan. I happen to like them both. But Widespread Panic always had a place in my heart because I kind of grew up on their sound. I remember listening to them at Georgia Peach Jam, and seen them open for Driving to Crying way back in the day. I won't even date myself with that. But I just had this love for design and this love for concert posters, and then this love for Widespread Panic. So I heard they were going to play at the Fox Theater, which another huge love for me is the Fox Theater. And if you live in Atlanta, you know what I'm talking about. It's a beautiful theater. So I feel like I had the opportunity to marry two things that I really loved, which is music, Widespread Panic, and the Fox Theater. At the time, I knew nothing about design. I was just kind of doing my thing. I was an English major and I didn't know what graphic design even was. So I kind of sketched up this picture of a dragon standing on top of the world, which to me was the ultimate Widespread Panic. And it was a pencil sketch, folded it up, mailed it off, because that's what we did back then, was put things in the mail.
Yep.
And mailed it to their manager, Mary Armstrong, who ran Brown Cat, which was their managing company. It might still be, in Athens, Georgia. And I didn't really think much of it. I went to back to school, and I came home for I think a spring break maybe, or some break, and we get a call on the phone. And that was a call on the landline, because we used to have those back in the day too. and my mom picked up the phone. She says it's Mary from Brown Cat, and I was like, whoa. Picked up the phone, talked to her, and she's like, yeah, we're interested in doing this poster. And of course, I knew nothing about posters. I had this little teeny Posters of Rock book. I now have the big version of that, but back in the day, I couldn't afford the big version. So I had this little teeny book, Posters of Rock, and I was really influenced by this guy, Rick Griffin. He's done a lot of artwork for Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix, etc. And that's pretty much all I knew about design at the time, was that this little book, and for music as far as that goes. And I collected vinyl records, and so I just started drawing. They're like, we want to do this for the show poster. So I just started drawing, and they're like, we want it to be 18 by 24. I'm like, what does that even mean? So I figured out what that meant and cut a big sheet of paper out to be 18 by 24. And then took my drawing and then kind of worked out from there to fill up the space. I even brought in a buddy to help me finish it, because we were doing it with magic markers and paint pens. And I mean, we had whiteout, we had everything. We were using all kinds of stuff to create this poster. It probably took, I would say, well over 100 hours to put it together. And I got to visit the band and like talk about it. They made it super cool for us to do.
While you were the English major, were you always doing stuff on the side like this, or was it just one day you kind of picked up a pen and started, it
was just one day. Just one day. It was really weird. I mean, I was taking art classes. I was taking a lot of figure drawing classes and stuff like that, really learning how to just hone my drawing ability. But like I said, I didn't know anything about design at the time, which was weird, because it's probably the perfect job for me, because I just love how things fit together, and I love drawing, and I love colors, and just everything about it just really appeals to me. So even at that point, it still didn't click that, hey, this is a profession that you could do. I continued to do gig posters after that, but it still was just like, oh, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to get a job, and that's, this thing could be my side hustle or something like that.
Yeah. Did you send any designs to any other bands, or was this kind of like, it was just
it's a one-time only thing.
I mean, that is, it's almost like a sign of all signs, right?
Right. Yeah. It's my calling.
So the manager called you up and said, we're interested. We need an 18 by 24. And then you went back to widespread, and what was the conversation?
So I kind of went back and forth several times. They didn't tell me it was supposed to be 18 by 24 until on down the line, which was kind of unfortunate, because I built the thing out and then had to build it, but figured it out. But I drive from, I was going to Presbyterian College at the time in Clinton, South Carolina. It's probably about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive to Athens. So I was going down there, and every time I'd have a check-in, since we didn't have the great interwebs we have now, I would drive it down there and show it to them. And then I would turn around, drive back, and make the changes they wanted. We got to meet with Dave Schools one time, who's the bass player and still a friend of mine and a phenomenal musician. So that was really, really cool. You get to kind of meet your heroes and realize they're just people like you.
Yep.
So that it was just a great experience all the way around.
I want to touch on, you mentioned the dragon and the design and how it's the widespread of all widespread posters. What, and this leads to another question around finding that kind of that inner soul via a design that brings out the soul of the brand or the band or the spirit, right? Like what did you see that said, hey, it needs to be a dragon, and then how do you bring that over to your other design work today?
That's a great question. I think that for that, I just always have thought widespread panic sounds like just mass hysteria. And what more than a dragon that's capable of standing on top of the world? I mean, I can't think of anything worse, anything more widespread.
Sure.
So I think just being close to that name, I mean, that's probably not the best example of me getting to the soul of the brand. But now I think the best way that I do that is I ask a lot of good questions from the get-go with the client. I just kind of really get a feel for how the client's thinking about their brand. I do a good amount of research before I even start to put pencil to paper. I I mean, a lot. Like I think like if I get a new job in, I think about it for a week before I even start. And so I'm like going to sleep thinking about it. I'm waking up. Sometimes I have even thought of something in my dream or something that's weird.
Wow.
And I wake up and I'm like, ready. I've got a new idea in my head for it. I try to think minimally and simply, just because I feel like that translates the best for a brand. And just kind of break it down to the bare bones. Learn as much as I can in a short amount of time.
So in your vast portfolio, you have everything from spirits, record labels, even ones that you've made up, which I thought that was pretty cool. To kind of corporate Salesforce.com, right?
Right.
How do you apply the same principles to a spirit company versus Salesforce.com? What are the things that you're looking for when you go? What types of questions are you asking? Are you asking the same questions, or is it different ones for different? Yeah,
I think it depends. Like the client, with a client like Salesforce, they've already given me like some stipulations on how things need to go. And
because you did the trailhead, right? The trailhead.
Right. I'm actually pretty entrenched in the Salesforce brand. I've done all kinds of stuff for them for the last 5 years. We've built screens that are like in their lobby that are 100 and something feet long. We've done trailheads. I've done Dreamforce. I'm rebranding their development team currently. Rebranded trailheads recently. Yes, and I did their yearbooks the last couple of years. Worked on illustrations for that, so I kind of understand. They've let my style become their style, kind of, and let me run with it a little bit. And I think that's an important point too. Is that the style I have, people come to me for that style, so I've already gotten through like 60% of the battle.
Right.
Designers, it's so hard when you've got a new client coming in. They know nothing about you. They know nothing about your style, but like 95% of the people that come to me, they're coming to me for my specific style. So we've already like crossed that bridge, which is huge as a designer. So to answer your question, with Salesforce, there's a lot of different, I'll say cooks in the kitchen, but there's more people that you have to run through versus a spirit company where they're like, they want you to kind of come up with the idea and you to push something forward, and it's more on you to be creative and come up with your own way of doing things. Salesforce is a great example of a super large client that is letting me kind of do my thing too, but they've got ideas in their mind too, and they understand their brand so well that they can speak to that and push me off in the right direction.
Sure. Let's talk about your style, right? Did the monoline style find you, or did you find the monoline style? Because it's very distinguished.
I think a little bit of both. I've been working at the same agency for now 22 years, I believe. And I reached a point where I won't say things were boring, but they weren't as fun as they used to be. I was doing the same stuff and everything was becoming kind of production-like, a lot of production work, a lot of stuff that I could do with my eyes closed. So I was losing touch with some of my values, which are like, be original and be creative. And I think that gets back to my art side. So I started doing stuff on the side. I started doing a lot of hand lettering. And I wasn't super good at that. I was good, but I wasn't fantastic. And I wanted to be like, this next thing I have to be really good at. And I wasn't necessarily looking for something to like take the place of my job or anything like that. Just kind of an outlet in the creative world, if that makes sense.
Of course.
So I started doing this, just drawing, and I felt like at this time period, this was probably like 7 years ago, there's an absence of hand drawn, like organic styling. Everything was getting real glossy and perfect, and I like the imperfections in art. So I would create I would draw these images and throw them down in Illustrator and trace over them and then refine them. And then I would take them, and I've created like different textures and different ways to distort and roughen the image. So I would refine it, and then I'd roughen it up to kind of install some imperfections in it and make it look more hand drawn and more people. I think people can really relate to that versus like something that's glossy and super polished. People really want stuff like that these days in a world of computers.
Right.
So I just kind of started developing that style, and it was. I'm not a great illustrator. I'm not a great drawer. I'm good at it, but I found a way to find something that fit with my not so great drawing and my not so great design that worked really well. And it kind of like just a light bulb went off, and I was able to really just like take off with it. And I was having so much fun doing it. I was just creating these brands that like don't even exist. Just to do it and to
and was this 10 years ago? So you're well into
my career,
well into your career, and it was just something where you started and correct me if I'm wrong, but just started working at night, working on your craft even more, right? Because I mean that's a profound kind of tipping point, right? Because a lot of people will just, and maybe settle's not the right word, but they won't keep sharpening the axe.
Right. I think that's a big problem with designers too. If you become complacent and you don't push yourself, then you won't ever get anywhere. I mean, it's probably like any other profession. You've got to constantly push yourself, stay on trend, develop your own trends, and you will go farther.
So that was a big risk, right? I mean, you work at Jackson Spalding, an amazing agency in Atlanta, been there for 22 years, but you've also have Steely Works, right? And doing your kind of branding yourself, right? And I want to get to how designers today, the balance of working for a shop versus working and building their own following. But what risks how do you continue to take safe risks, right?
So I'm super risk adverse. I mean, probably the most risk adverse person you'll ever meet. I've been at this agency for over 20 years. When my Steely Works stuff started taking off, it wasn't Steely Works, it was just Brian Steely at the time. I came to them and I'm like, hey guys, I'm either going to have to leave or we can figure out a way to make this work within the agency. And they let me I'm like, I can't call this stuff Jackson Spalding because it sounds to me like a law firm, and a lot of my clients are bands, beer breweries, cannabis, CBD, all this stuff that sees the name Jackson Spalding, and they're going to think, wow, these people cost a lot of money. So I like created Steely Works under their umbrella, and it's just right now it's just a one-man shop. I've got ideas to grow it a little bit, but that hasn't happened just yet. I see it on the horizon though. But it wasn't. I wouldn't even call it taking a risk because they made it. They're like, go for it, and I'm doing it under their umbrella still. So I'm still technically Jackson Spalding, and I still go in and do logo and branding work for Jackson Spalding. So when I'm doing my own thing, it's just Steely Works, and I still enter my time at Jackson Spalding and all that.
Sure. Going back to your style on Steely Works website, you talk about Hans Hofmann and how he was a great inspiration. What led you to Hans, and what principles of art do you take over to your work today?
That question, I probably need to update my bio because Hans has never been a huge influence to me. My creative director wrote that for me, and he sees similarities between our two styles. I will say that Hans, I like his use of form, his spacing, and his color. But I'll leave it at that. I mean, it's just he's doing painting and I'm doing design. There are definitely similarities between the two, our minimalist style. But I'll let my creative director write my bio for me, so that that's why that's
nice.
in there.
Well, we're definitely going to borrow some of that copy in the intro.
Yeah, sure.
When in your creative mornings talk, you shared finding symmetry and how you were really burning both ends of the candle, 40 hours a week at your regular job, 40 hours a week. Not on the side hustle, but just on the things that were really touching the soul. How do you do that with a family? And is it sustainable? And has that drive always been there?
I don't think that drive's always been there. I didn't always do great in school. I didn't always do great in college. But once I found my thing that I really wanted to hustle on, I really put my heart and soul into it. But yeah, it's always a difficult struggle with family and it's time. I mean, time's always, you never can have enough of it.
Yep.
So going through this pandemic, it's been really good for me because I've had a lot more work, which is weird, but I've had a lot more time with my family too, because I've been around the house a lot more, working from home and saving on that commute and saving on that lunch break. And it's easier to hit the goal at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I know. I was talking with someone the other day. I was like, a turkey sandwich with cheese and a couple chips is amazing. I don't need to go spend 45 minutes and get a farm burger, even though they are good. But
yeah, Cheez-Its has become my snack. I'll probably keep them in business right now. The toasty Cheez-Its.
Those are delicious.
Yeah.
Let's talk about design success, and success being, I feel like, well, let's just start with a simple question. How much of design success is just putting out a really good product versus the sales and the marketing and getting it in front of the right people, right? Because you could have designed that widespread panic poster and never sent it off, and it's still there. It's still good. It's still, desirable. But you were like, you know what? I'm going to put this in the mail. Like, especially in today's world of social media and branding, and how do you view that?
I think if you can land on something unique that's easily identifiable with the logo work, it's always going to do well in the market. I don't do a lot of market testing. I kind of, my prices are so good that I don't have time to do all that kind of stuff. But I do believe that if you do great design, it will get rewarded. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. And when I do work through Jackson Spalding, it's always market tested. That's not really where I go. But yeah, that's such an important part of it. I tend to focus on the small to medium clients, and people like Salesforce. They've done their marketing research and all that when they come to me, and they know what they're looking for.
And we're going to take a quick break here and share that this podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business out of Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com. So if you were to go back and tell someone, or tell the 20-year-old Steely, right? Hey, design is something that you care about, that you're going to be successful in. How much of it is just putting out amazing product versus for young designers today, right? I mean, should they be building their own brand? Should they be blogging about it? Should they be doing the things that may not be behind just working on their craft?
Yeah, I think that's definitely important. You have to get, it's interesting. I had a great man once tell me, and this was early in my career, keep yourself invisible by keeping your client visible. And that honestly is the worst piece of advice I've ever gotten. As a designer, you've got to keep yourself visible. You've got to, I mean, how else are they going to find out about you? How else are clients going to see your work and know, you create this style. If you're invisible, then nobody's ever going to see this style. You've got to push it out there. You've got to work the social media streams to a degree. I love Instagram, and it's been good to me. Pinterest. There's so many different social media streams to help you build your brand, but if you're going to be doing work, you don't have time to attack all those. So you kind of find the ones that are working for you. Word of mouth is really important. Relationships are always really important. Don't ever burn any bridges. Always treat people how you want. Stuff we learned in church.
Yeah,
all this stuff still super relevant in the way you build your brand and how the way you treat people, because you do good work and you give it to somebody, they're going to recommend you to somebody else, and they're going to it's kind of like a pyramid that grows, and it works. So,
when I talk to branding folks and I talk to designers, there's always that internal debate of logo, brand. And how do you look at, does the logo define the brand, or does the brand define the logo?
So much goes into a brand. I think the logo is super important, but most people will tell you that it's not. It's the people in your company building the brand. It's so many things. I look at the visual brand more than anything. The visual brand is what's important to me, because that's what I do for people. I create this logo, and then I create design elements that run off this logo, and it creates this look and feel that if you stick to that, your brand will grow. And obviously a brand is a lot more than a logo and some colors and some fonts and some design elements. But man, out of the gates, if you do those things right and you follow the style guide, that's an important part of your brand.
Yeah, it's so true. And the people aspect is so important in my opinion around. So you can have a great logo, but if you don't have the right feeling and the right values, it's an empty logo, right? And even if it's amazing, and so how have you felt out corporations or spirits or restaurants or whatever, and when you're like, this feels right? I'm going to put Steely Works name and brand on this logo just by creating it, right? Because I'm sure you're turning things down.
Of course. Yeah. So an excellent example of that is the Argosy in East Atlanta. They had went in there right after they finished their complete when they moved in, they renovated the whole building. Probably spent $1 million on the renovation. And they had a logo that looked kind of like clip artist to me. And I was like, hey, let me do your logo for you. I think it's just such an important part of starting out. And they weren't into it at all. And 5 years later, they came back to me. And not because I had come to them 5 years earlier, but because they knew my style at that time and the style had developed, and asked me to do their logo. So I do think it's important to have the right logo and the right people. Those two things have to happen. But you can give somebody a bad logo. You can give somebody a great logo, and they're not the right people, and they can be successful for a really long time. But
what did you like in Argosy that where you went to them and sought out their business?
Beer. I love beer. Good food, beer. I like the ambiance of the place. I just think they did a beautiful job with that building. It doesn't feel like it doesn't really belong in East Atlanta, really. It's just got this vibe to it that's real different than anywhere else in that little neighborhood. And I just thought it was beautiful.
In your creative morning talk, when Widespread Panic came back and said, hey, how much do you want for this? And you were like, nothing, here you go. And, no matter what they would have paid you, I'm sure that, in retrospect, they gave you tickets to shows, and I'm sure you got thousands of dollars worth of.
I did. The experience side of things. The experience side of things was much more valuable than the money. And I got I got my focus on my career is what they gave me. Unknowing it at the time, that never would have happened probably if. I mean, I look at how that one poster got me, and so like I took that poster and I went to Portfolio Center, and they're like, "Let's see your portfolio," and I'm like, "All I've got is this poster I did," and I enrolled it and showed it to the admissions lady, and she's like, "If I can have that poster, you can be in. You can be a student." And I know she would have let me in anyway because they wanted my money.
Yeah.
But it was still kind of cool that that's all I had done, and that was kind of like my stepping stone into my career. I was doing it for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. I was doing it for my love of the music and for my love of art. And I think that's what Steely Works is all about. Is I've gotten to the point where it's not a job anymore. And I can't say that for every client I have, but for a lot of the clients I really have a great time creating with them and learning about them and giving them something I'm really proud of and that I love. And, and then it's not work anymore. And that's what we all set out to do, is to find something that we really love and that we can like sink our teeth into and grow with.
Well said. We have a lot of creators and whether it's writers or movement makers on the Atlanta Story podcast. And I do like to talk about their creative process, right? Are you someone that blocks off time on your calendar daily or is Tuesday and Thursday the day that you don't take meetings? How do you get the most out of your creative output?
Oh, that changes really. Lately, I'm so busy that I don't have a lot of time to block time like that. It's been a crazy couple months. Because I hate to keep coming back to the pandemic, but because of it, and because of my spirits and brewery work and cannabis work and CBD work, those are all things people need right now.
Yeah.
So it's blowing up right now for me. But I do take time, like, it's often before I go to bed. I'm like laying, I don't get as much sleep as I probably need because I think about it a ton while I'm falling asleep. And try to solve a problem or come up with a solution while I'm falling asleep. And I keep a pad and paper by my bed and, write it down, and some chicken scratch if I have something that I think is truly great. But I am constantly thinking about my work. I'm like, I go on a walk, I'm thinking about my work. I turn it off when I'm with my family, but for the most part, like probably a real bad percentage of time is spent thinking about my work.
Sure.
And it's hard to block like a full day. I'd love to be able to block days and like say, hey, this day is just devoted to thinking about this. This day is devoted to thinking about this. But I do like think about something for a good, like I said earlier, like a week before I get rolling on it. So I've kind of, with my pricing the way it is, I really have to have a great idea in my mind before I sit down to sketch, because otherwise I'm wasting time.
In that week that you're thinking about it, are you thinking design aspects, or are you thinking more cultural, or what is the organizational culture like that will then lead into design?
I'm thinking my stuff's pretty simple. I'm thinking pretty much design. I definitely think about, it really is going to depend on the client. If it's a big client, I'm thinking about the impact it will have in other aspects of the brand.
Sure.
But for smaller things, I am strictly thinking about, can I come up with something original? Can I come up with something unique that will stand the test of time? And that's really important to me, is that I give a client something that's just unique and they won't have to come back looking for another logo in a couple of years. They're good to go for a while. That's real important to me.
A couple more questions, Steely. how does someone where their output, their creative output is paramount to, putting food on the table, right? How do you feed that muse, right? I mean, what inspires you?
I get asked this question pretty much every time, and I love it because I'm inspired by everything. Like, I'm inspired by nature. I'm inspired by my family. I'm inspired looking at a flat stone. I mean, I can find inspiration everywhere. It's just, you just have to keep your eyes open.
Yeah. It's a good way to look at it.
And it's everywhere. Like in the design world, I constantly, I look on Dribble Daily for inspiration. I look on Instagram for inspiration. Flip through magazines, read books. I mean, it's all out there. And you just have to take it and make it your own.
Let's talk about the Atlanta design community, right? You've been around for, like you said, a couple decades. How has it changed from, let's say, 20 years ago to today in terms of, is there collaboration? Do we have a niche in the design world from a global perspective?
It's an interesting question. I don't think we have a niche in the globally, but I don't think any city really does. I think about that a lot. I think we've got a lot of great designers here in Atlanta, and they're all kind of doing their own thing. I have never looked at it as a system or, you've got your agencies that collaborate with each other. I collaborate with people all around the world. I love my Atlanta design friends, but the Atlanta design world is kind of transient. People come, go. We've got, of course, AIGA. We've got Portfolio Center. We've got Creative Circus. We've got SCAD. We've got lots of great opportunities for kids to grow. But a lot of times they leave, they want to go, design in New York for a couple of years. I recommend that. I didn't do that, but I wish I had. Get out there and learn more about the world. I think that'll impact your design. And I think a lot of people in the Atlanta community do that. Atlanta's become, we've got design conferences here that happen from time to time. We've got a great design conference in Columbus, Georgia, Creative South, that happens every year. That I would highly recommend any designer to get at any age to go to find an inspiration. But Atlanta as a whole, maybe because I'm a lone wolf, I don't see it as much. We have meetups and stuff like that, but I'm kind of a lone wolf out here.
Steely, we always like to end the podcast on two questions. Why Atlanta, and what has Atlanta done for you?
Why Atlanta? I was born here.
And why did you stay? Why did you stay? Right. I'm sure you've had opportunities to go to New York or California.
My roots are so deep here. I married a woman that I went to high school with, who we didn't date in high school. We didn't date in college, but we went to the same high school. Our parents both live here. The roots are deep. We had kids here. Our kids grew up here. It's just, I love Atlanta. People will say bad things about Atlanta, and I get really upset about it because I think it's one of the best places. I've been a lot of places, and I don't know if I get the itch. I got an airport, the biggest airport in the world, 15 minutes away. It'll take me wherever I want to go. I want to get out of Atlanta for a bit. But I love the neighborhoods in Atlanta. If you've lived in Atlanta for a while, you really understand how great Atlanta is. And a lot of people don't give it the time to understand that. But being a boy here and growing up and going to school, and I went off to college and I immediately came right back to Atlanta just because it's such a great place. So much energy here, and such a melting pot of different cultures and different people.
Brian Steely, thank you so much for being part of the Atlanta Story podcast. We really appreciate your time and all the great conversation today. It's been, we're very grateful.
Thank you so much, Jon. Appreciate it.
This podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. It was co-produced by JC Lucas and Jon Birdsong. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business in Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com and the companies we work with who've done it before. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it at your next coffee meeting or dinner greeting, rate it, and write a benevolent, eloquent review.